In 1978, a widowed railroad worker in Kansas named Earl Hendricks ate ground beef 6 nights a week for 12 straight years. His neighbors thought he was lonely and broke. His doctor said he was the healthiest 72-year-old on his patient list. That rotation is the backbone of this list. Number 14 costs less than $2 and feeds a man for 3 days. Number 8 was perfected in a bachelor's trailer in West Virginia in 1963. And number 1, the meal that has kept more widowers and divorced granddads alive on fixed incomes than any food pantry in America, has been almost completely forgotten by younger generations. These 25 dirt-cheap ground beef meals were built for one thing: keeping a man fed, warm, and independent when the kitchen got quiet. Hit that subscribe button. Let's count down the 25 ground beef meals granddads living alone swear by. Number 25, hamburger and rice skillet. 1 pound of ground beef, a cup of white rice, a can of beef broth, half an onion, and a splash of soy sauce. That was a full Tuesday night supper for a granddad in a quiet kitchen. You browned the beef in a cast iron skillet, drained most of the fat, stirred in the rice and the chopped onion, poured the broth over the top and covered it tight. 20 minutes of low heat, and the rice drank in every bit of that beefy, salty liquid. A pound of ground beef cost about $1.19 in 1985. A box of rice was 59 cents. This meal fed a man for 3 days. You reheated it in the same skillet the next morning, let the bottom crunch up a little, and it somehow tasted better the second round. Railroad widowers across the Midwest kept this in heavy rotation because it asked for nothing but a fork and a napkin. Number 24, ground beef and cabbage. The cheapest vegetable in America met the cheapest protein in America, and the result was supper. A pound of beef browned, half a head of cabbage cored and chopped rough, a can of diced tomatoes, salt, pepper, a shake of garlic powder, everything into the same pan. 25 minutes of simmering on low, and the cabbage collapsed into silky ribbons that caught every drop of the beef fat and tomato juice. A head of cabbage cost less than $1. It kept for 3 weeks in the crisper drawer without complaint. For a widower with arthritis in his hands, chopping cabbage was something he could do sitting at the kitchen table with a paring knife. No strength required, no fancy knife work. This meal went from skillet to plate, and nobody had to know the cook never bothered with a cutting board. Number 23, poor man's stroganoff. Real stroganoff uses tenderloin and white wine. Poor man's version uses ground beef and a can of cream of mushroom soup. Granddad's version went like this: brown a pound of ground beef with a diced onion, drain the fat, stir in 1 can of cream of mushroom soup, half a can of water, and a heaping spoonful of sour cream if you had it. Pour it over cooked egg noodles. That was it. 9 minutes of work, a plate of something that tasted like a church basement supper from 1971. The soup gave it a creamy mushroom depth without a single chopped mushroom. The sour cream added tang. The beef made it stick to your ribs. A pound of ground beef, a can of soup, and a bag of noodles came in under $4 and fed a man 3 times. This was Thursday night comfort for a generation of men who did not cook. Number 22, beef hash. When there was leftover ground beef from 2 nights ago and half a bag of potatoes in the pantry, a granddad made hash. You diced the cold, boiled potatoes small. Everything went into a hot cast iron skillet with a little oil. You pressed it flat with the back of a spatula and left it alone for 7 minutes without stirring. That was the secret. You let the bottom crisp into a brown golden crust. Then you flipped sections of it and let the other side crisp, too. An egg fried on top if you had one, a splash of hot sauce if you wanted to feel alive. This meal cost almost nothing because everything in it was already paid for. It was Saturday morning for a man whose wife passed in 1997, eaten at the kitchen table next to a newspaper folded to the sports page. Dignity came in a skillet. Number 21, Hamburger soup. The name is literal. 1 pound of browned ground beef, 1 can of diced tomatoes, 1 can of mixed vegetables, 1 potato diced small, 1 packet of onion soup mix, and 6 cups of water. Everything went into one big pot. 45 minutes of simmering, and you had a soup so hearty it ate like a stew. The onion soup mix was the quiet hero. It seasoned the whole pot for less than 50 cents and tasted like something that had cooked for hours. A granddad could eat from this pot for 4 days. It got better each night as the potatoes broke down and thickened the broth. He froze half of it in a yogurt container for the week after that. 1 pound of beef fed him for 8 meals. Math that made fixed income arithmetic finally come out in his favor. Number 20, Sloppy Joes from scratch. Not the can of manwich, the real kind. Brown 1 pound of ground beef with 1 diced onion. Stir in half a cup of ketchup, 2 tablespoons of yellow mustard, 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, a splash of Worcestershire, and a pinch of salt. Let it simmer for 10 minutes until the whole thing turned glossy and thick. Spoon it onto a soft, white hamburger bun. It was a meal that a 6-year-old and an 80-year-old both loved for the same reasons: sweet, tangy, and warm. It did not require strong teeth. It did not require a knife. A pack of hamburger buns cost $1. The whole pan cost under $5 and made 6 sandwiches. Granddads kept a container of this in the fridge and ate it for lunch all week. The flavor deepened every day it sat. Number 19, classic American goulash. First pattern break. This has nothing to do with Hungarian goulash. This is the 1962 cafeteria version that conquered American kitchens and never let go. A pound of ground beef browned with an onion, a can of tomato sauce, a can of diced tomatoes, 2 cups of dry elbow macaroni, 3 cups of water, a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. Everything went into one pot. 20 minutes later, the macaroni had cooked directly in the sauce and absorbed every bit of the flavor. Here is what nobody talks about. The reason this meal spread from Ohio lunch counters to every American home in the 1970s was because canned tomato companies bought ads in magazines showing it as the modern American dinner. They wanted housewives to buy 3 cans at once. What they got instead was a generation of men who learned to make it from their mothers and kept making it for themselves after those mothers were gone. A goulash pot was not just dinner, it was a promise that a man could still take care of himself when the house went quiet. Number 18, beef and bean skillet. Open a can of pinto beans. Open a can of diced tomatoes with green chilies. Brown a pound of ground beef. Dump everything into the same skillet with a packet of taco seasoning. Simmer 10 minutes. Eat it straight from the pan with tortilla chips or a spoon. A granddad in San Antonio named Raymond ate this 3 nights a week for 17 years after his wife passed. He served it over rice on Monday, over cornbread on Wednesday, and folded it into a warm flour tortilla on Friday. Same pot, 3 different meals. The cost came to under $4 per batch and fed him for 3 days. The beans stretched the beef so it did not feel like he was eating mostly meat. The chilies gave it a kick that kept it interesting. A single skillet, a single fork, a full stomach. Number 17, Texas Chili Mac. Some people call it Chili Mac. Some call it skillet dinner. Whatever the name, it was the same thing. A pound of ground beef, a can of chili beans, a can of tomato sauce, a cup of water, a packet of chili seasoning, and a cup of dry elbow macaroni all in the one pan, simmered, covered for 15 minutes until the noodles cooked right in the sauce, topped with a handful of shredded cheddar that melted from the heat. Forget the cost for a second. This was a meal that came together in 20 minutes with no cutting board and no second pan to wash. For a granddad with swollen knuckles on both hands, simplicity was not laziness, it was survival. Every bite carried chili, pasta, beef, and cheese in a single mouthful. This was Sunday night football food, eaten in the quiet of a living room alone. Number 16. Beef and potato skillet. The cheapest meal on this list, and maybe the best one. A pound of ground beef, browned with an onion. 3 diced potatoes added straight to the pan. Cover and cook on low for 20 minutes, stirring occasionally until the potatoes were soft and had soaked up every bit of the beef grease. Salt and pepper to taste, a handful of shredded cheese on top if you had it. That was the whole meal. No broth, no sauce, no measuring. A granddad in rural Pennsylvania told his visiting niece that this exact meal was why he had not lost a single pound since his wife died 8 years earlier. The potatoes filled the gaps that loneliness tried to open. The beef made it feel like something worth sitting down for. $3 made enough food for 2 days. Every bite tasted like the kitchen was still alive. Number 15. Stuffed peppers. This entry bends the one skillet rule slightly because the peppers bake in the oven, but the filling comes together in a single pan. Brown 1 pound of ground beef with 1 onion. Stir in 1 cup of cooked rice, 1 can of tomato sauce, salt, and pepper. Spoon the mixture into 4 halved bell peppers, cover with the remaining sauce, and bake at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. The peppers soften into tender, edible bowls. The filling stays moist from the tomato. Each pepper is a complete meal by itself. A granddad could make this on Sunday and eat one each night through Wednesday. They reheat in the microwave in 2 minutes flat. The whole pan costs about $5 and feeds a man for 4 days. They looked like effort. They looked like his wife had cooked them. They tasted like something from a family dinner table from 1964. Number 14. Beef and noodle bake. This is the meal that a West Virginia bachelor named Frank Coleman perfected in a trailer outside Beckley in 1963 and passed around his pinochle group until half the county was making it. He used 1 pound of ground beef, browned with an onion, a bag of egg noodles boiled until just shibichi, 1 can of cream of mushroom, 1 can of cream of chicken, 1 cup of milk, 1 cup of shredded cheese. Everything stirred together in a baking dish and topped with more cheese. Bake for 30 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. It came out bubbling, golden, and so rich you could almost hear the cheese crackle as it cooled. For a 74-year-old man with a fixed income and nobody to cook for, this pan of food was Tuesday through Friday. He cut it into squares, he wrapped each square in foil, and he ate one every night with a can of green beans on the side. Frank's recipe was never written down. It spread because it worked. Number 13. One-pot beef and mac. The simplest meal on this list, and possibly the one most granddads depended on. Brown. A pound of ground beef with an onion. Stir in a cup of dry elbow macaroni, a can of tomato soup, a cup of water, and a pinch of garlic powder. Cover and simmer for 12 minutes until the pasta was tender and had drunk in the tomato soup. Stir in a handful of shredded cheddar at the end. It tasted like a cross between goulash and macaroni and cheese, and it was neither. For a granddad eating alone, this was the meal that appeared when he did not feel like cooking, but knew he needed to eat. 9. Ingredients. 15 minutes, one dirty pan, 3 nights of supper. He stood at the stove, stirring with a wooden spoon, and remembered when this same exact meal had come out of his mother's kitchen in 1949. Here is what the big retirement home companies do not want you to think about. The senior citizens who stay in their own houses the longest, the ones who live to 90 in a home they still clean themselves, are not the ones eating frozen Stouffer's dinners every night. They are the ones who still know how to brown a pound of ground beef. This is about independence. There is a quiet dignity in cooking your own supper. It is the kind of thing that keeps a man's hands steady and his mind sharp. It gives him a reason to go to the grocery store on Tuesday. It fills the kitchen with smells that do not let him forget the house is still his. Frozen dinners come pre-portioned, pre-plated, and pre-lonely. A pound of ground beef sizzling in a cast iron skillet is a promise to yourself that you are still here and still capable. That is what this list has always been about. Not just nutrition, not just money. Both matter. But what matters more is the act of doing it. A man who cooks still belongs to himself. They called it SOS in the Army, but every granddad in America has a simple version of it. 1 pound of ground beef, browned in a skillet. A spoonful of flour stirred in to soak up the grease. 2 cups of milk poured in slowly while stirring. Salt, pepper, a pinch of garlic powder. Let it thicken for 3 minutes until it is the consistency of a rich gravy with beef throughout. Pour it over 2 slices of buttered toast. That was supper. 1 pound of beef and a loaf of bread cost under $5 and fed a man for 4 nights. The first time a granddad made this after his wife passed away, he cried a little because it was the meal she used to make on the nights the paycheck was late. Then he ate it. Then he made it again the next week, then every week after. Number 10, ground tacos. A pound of ground beef, a packet of taco seasoning, 3/4 of a cup of water, and a box of hard taco shells. Brown the beef, drain it, add the seasoning and the water, then simmer for 5 minutes. Spoon the meat into the shells, top with shredded cheese and whatever vegetables were in the crisper. A granddad could assemble a plate of 4 tacos in under 10 minutes. The shells came 12 to a box for about $2. The meat cost under $2 more. The seasoning was 50 cents, $3 per meal, and you got 2 nights of it. Granddads kept the leftover meat in a Tupperware container and reheated it into a nacho plate the next day. Taco night became a fixture in American kitchens from 1972 onward because old El Paso taught a whole generation how to make restaurant food at home with 1 pan and a packet. A pound of ground beef, an egg, half a cup of breadcrumbs or crushed saltines, a 1/4 cup of milk, a diced onion, salt, pepper, a splash of Worcestershire sauce, and a topping of ketchup mixed with brown sugar. Everything mashed together by hand and shaped into a loaf. Baked at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 50 minutes until the top was glossy and caramelized. The smell that filled the kitchen while it baked was the smell of every grandmother in America. For a granddad cooking alone, a meatloaf was a commitment. It meant he was cooking a real meal. It meant he would have leftovers that sliced into perfect sandwiches for 3 more days. The loaf cost under $6 to make and fed him for a week. A meatloaf sandwich on white bread with mayonnaise and a slice of raw onion at 2 in the afternoon was the definition of retirement. Shape 1 pound of ground beef into 4 oval patties. Brown them in a skillet, then set them aside. In the same pan, cook down 1 sliced onion until golden. Stir in 1 spoonful of flour, 1 cup of beef broth, a splash of Worcestershire sauce, and a pat of butter. Return the patties to the pan and let them simmer in the gravy for 10 minutes. Serve it over mashed potatoes or egg noodles. This was the 1970s TV dinner, elevated back to its scratch form. It tasted like a Friday night at a Meat and Three diner in Tennessee. The trick was not letting the patties cook all the way through before the gravy went in. They finished cooking in the sauce and stayed tender instead of turning to leather. A granddad made this once a month because it felt like a special occasion. It cost about $5. It ate like 20. Number 7. Beef and rice stuffed cabbage skillet. The deconstructed version of a dish that every Polish and Hungarian grandmother in the Midwest made on Sundays. Instead of wrapping individual leaves, a granddad just chopped the cabbage, mixed his ground beef with cooked rice, an egg, and seasoning, rolled the mixture into balls, and layered everything in a Dutch oven with a can of tomato sauce and a can of tomato soup. Baked, covered at 350 for 90 minutes. The cabbage steamed down into tender ribbons. The meatballs soaked up the sweet tart tomato. The whole house smelled like a church luncheon in the best possible way. This pan fed a man for 4 days. It reheated beautifully. The flavor deepened every time it went back in the oven. A granddad in Cleveland, whose mother immigrated from Poland in 1951, made this every other week until the day he died at 91. He said it tasted like her kitchen. Number 6. Johnny Marzetti casserole. This is the meal that conquered school cafeterias in Ohio and Michigan in the 1950s, and it spread across the country on the backs of mimeographed church recipe cards. 1 pound of ground beef, 1 pound of egg noodles, 1 can of tomato soup, 1 can of mushroom soup, a diced onion, a diced bell pepper, and 2 cups of shredded cheese. Bake it in a casserole dish at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. It was named after the husband of Marzetti's restaurant owner, Teresa Marzetti, in Columbus, Ohio, around 1896. It became the default potluck dish of Middle America because it fed a crowd for under $10, held up for hours on a buffet table, and tasted better the next day. For a granddad cooking alone, a pan of Johnny Marzetti provided 6 nights of suppers. He scooped portions into margarine containers and stacked them in the freezer. On the night he did not feel like cooking, he pulled one out and ate it at the kitchen table with a glass of cold milk. Number 5. Hobo dinners. Originally cooked over a campfire in tinfoil, hobo dinners became a kitchen staple for men who wanted a hot meal with 0 dishes to wash. A 1/4 pound patty of ground beef, a sliced potato, a sliced carrot, a sliced onion, salt, pepper, and a pat of butter, all wrapped together in a square of heavy aluminum foil. Baked at 400 degrees for 45 minutes. The steam trapped in the foil cooked everything perfectly. The beef stayed juicy. The vegetables absorbed the drippings. When you opened the foil packet, it was like unwrapping a present. A granddad could make 4 of these at once, eat one for supper, and refrigerate the other 3 for the rest of the week. 0 plates, 0 pans, 0 cleanup. Just eat straight out of the foil with a fork and throw it in the trash. This was the bachelor's best-kept secret. Number 4. Chili with beans. Depression-era cooks called it a pot of brown. Granddads across America just call it chili. 1 pound of ground beef, browned with an onion, 2 cans of kidney beans, 2 cans of diced tomatoes, a packet of chili seasoning, or a spoonful each of chili powder, cumin, and garlic. Simmered for 30 minutes, topped with shredded cheese and a dollop of sour cream. A pot of chili cost $5 and fed a granddad for 5 nights. He ate it as chili on Monday. He ate it as a chili dog on Tuesday, over a baked potato on Wednesday, over Fritos with cheese on Thursday, stirred into a bowl of boxed mac and cheese on Friday. 5 meals from one pot. The beans made the beef go twice as far. The tomatoes gave it brightness. The spices made it taste like something that had simmered all day. A Granddad's chili pot was the most valuable object in his kitchen. Number 3, ground beef and gravy over biscuits. Brown a pound of ground beef. Do not drain the fat. Stir in a 1/4 cup of flour and let it soak up the grease. Pour in 2½ cups of milk, stirring constantly until it thickened into a creamy gravy. Season with salt and a generous amount of black pepper. Poured over split-hot biscuits, this was the Saturday breakfast that carried through to Saturday supper. A tube of refrigerator biscuits cost $2. The rest was already in the house. For a granddad in Kentucky or West Virginia, this was the meal that his mother had made on the mornings his father left for the coal mine. He made it now in her memory. He ate it now in his own kitchen. The connection from one generation to the next stretched across a half-century in a single plate of biscuits and gravy. Food remembers what people forget. Number 2, ground beef, noodle soup. A pound of ground beef browned in a pot, 8 cups of water, a cube of beef bouillon, a can of diced tomatoes, 2 cups of egg noodles, a cup of mixed frozen vegetables, salt and pepper, simmered together for 20 minutes. This soup fed a man for 4 days out of a single pot. It reheated without losing quality. It warmed a house on a cold day. The bouillon cube was the secret. It turned water into a rich broth in 90 seconds and saved a granddad the trouble of keeping boxed stock on hand. The frozen vegetables added color and nutrition and cost less than $1 a bag. A man with the flu could eat this soup when he could not stomach anything else. A man tired from mowing the lawn at 78 could heat up a bowl in 2 minutes. This pot was medicine and supper in one. Number 1, shepherd's pie skillet. The number 1 dirt-cheap ground beef meal that granddads living alone swear by is a shepherd's pie made in a single cast-iron skillet. Brown a pound of ground beef with an onion. Stir in a can of mixed vegetables or a cup of frozen peas and carrots. Season with salt, pepper, a spoonful of Worcestershire sauce, and a pinch of thyme. Spoon a box of prepared instant mashed potatoes over the top, smooth it flat, sprinkle with shredded cheese, and slide the whole skillet under the broiler for 5 minutes until the top turns golden brown with crispy edges. That skillet came to the kitchen table as a complete meal. Protein, vegetables, starch, and cheese in one pan. No plates required if a granddad did not feel like washing up. Just a fork and the skillet itself. The top crust crunched. The beef underneath was rich with gravy. The instant potatoes tasted nothing like instant once they crisped. This meal cost about $4 and fed a man for 3 days. And here is what made shepherd's pie the number 1 meal for granddads living alone. It was hot, it was filling, it was cheap, and most importantly, it looked like dinner. It looked like something his wife would have made. It looked like something worth sitting down for. A man eating a shepherd's pie out of a cast-iron skillet at his own kitchen table at 79 years old, with a glass of iced tea and the evening news on low, is a man who is still running his own life. That is what this list has been about from the beginning. Not survival food, not poverty food, dignity food. Here is my challenge. Pick one. The goulash, the hobo dinner, the Johnny Marzetti, the shepherd's pie. Make it this week. Sit down at your kitchen table. Eat it slow. Then tell me in the comments which one you made. I want to know if the chili gets more love than the meatloaf. I want to know if anyone else's granddad kept a cast iron skillet on the stove like a monument, because these are not just recipes. They are the reason men like ours stayed standing.